Last December, Tanya and I went to a wedding for a daughter of some of our really good friends. And the wedding was at a venue out in Magnolia. And so we went, we had a great time. And then after the reception, we began to head back. And the sun was setting just as we got in the car. And because it was December, it got dark pretty quick. And we were driving those country roads, 2-lane country roads. And there's actually hills out there. And so we were going up and we were going down. And as we were driving, I could see in the very far distance some blinking red lights. And I just assumed, just locked in my mind, oh, I guess there's a blinking red light somewhere on the road. And so we continued to drive, and I'd see those lights when we crested at the top of the hill, but then I would lose those lights as we got to the bottom of the hill. And so I'm just cruising along, and I can tell that we're getting closer, but they didn't seem that close to me until I heard the word, stop. And when Tanya tells me to stop, I stop. And I was so glad I stopped because those flashing lights that I had seen from a distance had been lights that were flashing on an 18-wheeler. But it had actually parked on the road. It had stopped and all of its lights were off. I guess she caught a reflector. It was one of those car carrier trailers. And when she said, stop, and I stopped, suddenly I saw that trailer just right ahead of us. And if she hadn't said anything, I would have been parking my car on that trailer also. She saved us from a horrible wreck. And that's not the only time she's done that in our marriage. It's happened in a car, certainly. But more than that, it happens just in life. Because of her wisdom, because of her insight, she's helped me not to experience wrecks in my parenting, wrecks in my vocation, my opportunities, wrecks in my friendship, in our finances. It's such a blessing to experience the teamwork that happens in a marriage. And she has been such a great, incredible partner for me. And if you're new to us, we're in a series beginning on marriage because we want you to have a marriage that is so full of God's love and so full of his hope and his strength. But we also know that there are some people that have experienced deep hurt, deep heartache, because maybe you did not experience that in your relationship, or maybe someone has walked out on you, but you need to know there's still healing. There's healing and there's vision that if God leads you to another relationship that you can do it his way. And then also for those of you who are dating and interested in someone, that you put the foundations down now and say, you know what? I want to do it your way, Lord. I want to be so clear about that. Not that doing it God's way means we don't suffer, we don't experience pain, heartache, disappointment. But the Lord is so good and his way works. We've used two illustrations that I think help me see, hopefully it helps you see how God designs relationships. It's the difference between the triangle and the line. The triangle is such a clear picture of the way God blesses relationships. You see that right there. God is at the top of the triangle. We come to know God through Jesus Christ. The man and the woman, the husband and the wife, are at the bottom of the triangle. We're in submission to him. And you see that the Lord is our priority. And the beauty of the triangle is the closer you grow to God, the closer you grow to one another. That is a Christ-centered relationship. That's God's design for friendships, that they're Christ-centered, for dating relationships, and certainly for marriage and parenting, that we have a Christ-centered relationship. You can trust the triangle because the option is the line. The line is just a horizontal relationship between a man and a woman. In other words, you're doing the best you can based on your motivation, your experience, but you don't have the supernatural help of God leading you. You don't have the supernatural authority of God to show you this is the path, this is the way to walk. So we've said many weeks in a row, you can trust the triangle, you can trust the Lord in the way he does relationships. And last week we talked about the role of a husband. We talked about the role of a husband, and we looked at 1 Peter chapter number 3. And we saw that the husband demonstrates three roles in loving his wife. A husband is a student. It says we grow in understanding of our wives. Verse 7 does. Growing in understanding means in ever-increasing knowledge. Whether you're brand new at marriage or you've been doing a long, long time, decades, There's always a consistent revealing of getting to know your partner better. Men, did you grow in understanding this week? Did you have eyes to see, ears to hear and understand even better? You grow as a student, but then also as a protector. Ephesians 5 tells us that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. And what did Christ do for the church? He died for the church. As a husband, we are protectors of our wives and our families to say, I will go first. I will go into the battle first on your behalf, on our behalf. I will protect you. It is something that we're called to do. And then finally, we're called to be servant leaders, not dominating leaders, but we lead like Jesus led. How did Jesus lead? Jesus led by serving. At such a critical moment in his life, at that Last Supper, when he was with his disciples, how did he demonstrate his authority and power? By getting down on his knees and washing his disciples' stinky feet. He said, I have come to serve. He shows us what servanthood and what sacrifice is like. That's how we lead. And so men, for us, we have to lead out. We lead out in conflict resolution. We lead out in asking forgiveness and granting forgiveness. We lead out in serving, and we lead out most of all in depending upon the Lord to be our strength. Because when we fulfill our role, we create an openness and a trust for our wives for the role that God has called them to serve in and God has called them to play. And ladies, for you, I just want to keep it simple so I can communicate it prayerfully, very clearly. You have one role that we're going to look at in these next 6 verses, and your role is that of a model. You are a model. Even better than that, you're a supermodel. Ladies, today, you need to know that you are a supermodel. In fact, men, if you're with your wives or if you're sitting next to a lady, just look at her right now and say you're a supermodel. You are supermodels. And even better than being a supermodel, listen to this. This is a fact. You are a beautiful supermodel. You are a beautiful, beautiful model. That is who God has called you to be, and that is what he has graced you to be. You are a model. So my supermodel friends, let's enter into God's word and see what he has to say to wives. 1 Peter 3, verse 1. Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. The first way you model is you model the love of Christ to your husbands. As models, you are going to model what? The love of Christ to your husbands. And the example that Peter is giving right here is pretty intense. Did you catch it? He is talking about someone who's in a difficult position, the challenging position of actually being married to someone who is not a believer. He's writing to women who are married to non-believers. But what he says is so crucial. He says the non-believing husband can come to believe. He can be won. Why? By the way his wife loves him. By the way his wife loves him through Christ, with her purity and with her reverence. In other words, the powerful influence your love has, it can even reach someone who is far away from the Lord. It says without even words. It doesn't mean that you don't use words. It means they see the consistency of Jesus Christ in your character, and Jesus Christ in your kindness, and it's obvious, and it becomes obvious over time. So just to make sure you see it, how do we love? We love because God first loved us. We receive the love of Christ, and then we give it away to other people. That's the beauty of the gospel. We receive it, and then we give it away to other people. In this instance, Peter says, you have received it, now you give it away by consistently living out your love so that your husband can be won. He sees it, and he says, I need it. There are so many stories, even in this room, of couples where the wife knew Christ way before the husband did, but they saw that consistency in you. They saw that delight and that desire in the Lord, and they said, I've got to have it. I've got to have it. And so I want to tell you, if that's your case right now, you hang in there. because God is going to use you. He will use you as you follow him. He says, love your husbands with a Christ-like love, and they will see it. But he gets very specific as to what this love does look like, because he said in that one command, did you catch it? He said, wives, submit to your husbands. And then in Ephesians 5, Paul echoes the same thing. Verse 22, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Now, when you hear that, some of you are going, yuck. Yuck, I like the beautiful part. I like that. I like the beautiful supermodel, but submit. I don't want to do that. Why? Because the secular lens has really co-opted that word, right? The secular world, if you look at submission from what people who don't know the Lord would tell us, to submit means that you're just already given in and saying, I'm a second-class citizen. I'm going to be demeaned. I'm going to be controlled, potentially even be abused. To be submissive to someone is to be less than. That is what it's going to be. That's what they would tell you. Why would you want to submit? That's just a co-op of your character, your personality. But that's not what the Bible teaches. That's not what God says. So let's reclaim a biblical definition of this powerful word. It's so important to the Lord, he included it in multiple places. Wives, you can love your husbands by submitting to them. What does the word actually mean? It's a military word. It means to rank under. It means to rank under. I grew up in an Air Force home, so submission was part of the deal for us. My dad always served under people that had a higher rank than him. And so we were very aware, the colonel's coming over, or we're gonna go someplace where there is a general. We understood submission. He was outranked by different people, but he still served. It's a military term. What does it mean? It means that God, in his creation, in the order of the family, considers your husband responsible. He's put your husband in a position of leadership. Now, it doesn't mean that your husband is obviously always right. You know that's not the case by any means. It's not about value. We have equal value before the Lord. Men and women, equal value before the Lord. Completely. We're men and women created in God's image. In fact, when the Lord said it's not good for man to be alone there in Genesis, he says, I'm going to give him a helper. The word helper is not helper like an assistant. It's helper. What it really means is someone who helps with the strength of God. That's what it means. So when a wife helps her husband, she is bringing the strength of God to the relationship. So it's not about value, it's about function. And the function is that there is an order that the Lord has put into your home. And the order is that God is going to hold your husband accountable for your family. I love Tony Evans' definition of this. I've said it many times because I think it's so great. He says, wives, listen to this. When it comes to submission, he goes, you need to relax because God is giving you permission to duck when he comes to slap your husband upside the head. Do you get it? So what you do is you love your husband by saying, I understand this is the God-called role for you, because he is doubting his role, I can tell you. He's gonna doubt his role, and he's gonna wanna push that position of authority off. He's gonna doubt his role, but you love him by saying, I submit to you because God has called me to, and I'm going to trust you. And let's put Ephesians 5 one more time, guys, back up there again. Verse 22, he says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. This is an act of worship to him. So you're really looking past your husband to the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, this is because you've called me to do this, so I'm gonna love my husband in this way. Does that make sense? Then how do we do that? How do we give this love away? Ephesians 5:33, he ends the chapter by saying, however, each of you must also love his wife as he loves himself. So again, men, calls us to the table, to accountability. We love our wives as Christ loved the church. And the wife must respect her husband. You show love when you give respect away. You show love when you give respect away. The Bible doesn't just call wives to respect their husbands. It calls husbands to respect their wives. It calls us to respect one another in the body of Christ, because respect is a gift. And in the context of a relationship, a Christian marriage, you know what respect is? It's saying, I believe in God in you. I believe in God in you. God is in you. He is at work. I am trusting him. I'm trusting him as the way he is growing you up. I love what Paul said in Philippians. He said, be confident of this, that he, God who began a good work in you, will be faithful to complete it. So ladies, let me get so real with you. On the day you said I do to your husbands, you may have been looking at a man on the outside, but there was a whole lot of boy on the inside. And I don't care how old a man gets, there is still a whole lot of boy on the inside. And for some of that boy, it's fun, it's adventurous, it's joyful, but there's some boy on the inside that's immature. There's some boy on the inside that hates to feel stupid. There's some boy on the inside that's asking the question, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes in this relationship, in our family, in my job? Do I have what it takes? And so God uses you in a powerful way to show your husband, to speak to him in such a way that he believes that God is at work in his life, that he believes his identity is not in what he does, but his identity is through Jesus Christ. You can speak the words that give life, because the powerful way you show respect is with your voice. It is with your voice. I, from time to time, will get the message on my phone, like some of you do, that my voicemail is full. And so I'll have to go in and I'll have to clear out old voicemails, and I'll just delete. But there's a few that I'm always going to save. One is from our son. He doesn't live here. He lives in Denver. So I always want to save that, because from time to time, I just want to hear his voice if I'm not talking to him. But then I have also a few messages from a friend of mine who's in heaven right now. And when I first got to know him, he was going through a very difficult cancer battle. And we would talk a lot, see each other, pray together. And he, even though he was in such a serious health crisis, he just had his eyes on the Lord, and he always wanted to serve other people. And so he would leave me voicemail messages that were so full of encouragement and so full of joy. And so I have some of his voicemail messages. He's been in heaven for 8 years, but sometimes I'll still listen to him from time to time, just to listen how faith-filled he was, how focused he was on other people. It just gives me life. And it made me think, if there would be a voicemail that people that were in a relationship with, in a family with, a deep, close friendship with, and if that voicemail would be basically an accumulation, a theme of all of the words that we have spoken to that person, what would that voicemail sound like? What would be the lasting impression of the words that we speak to people that we care about? What would be that impression? Would it be, I know that I've left words of encouragement? Or would it be that I've torn down? Because the Bible also tells us that in the tongue there are words of life, but then there are also words of death. You can start today by giving life away by your words. It shows respect. It shows respect, and we all need it. Men, women, boys, and girls, we all need it. We love by respecting other people. That's what we do. We give it away. We say, Lord, this is for you in the way that I'm loving them. But then he builds upon it. He builds on the way that we love. And ladies, he says this in verse 3. He says, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. He's saying that we model true beauty from the Lord. You model true beauty from the Lord. He's not against your outward appearance, how you look, your fashion style. He's not. But he's saying, don't put the emphasis on the external, but instead put it on the internal. Instead of saying, how do I look and how does the world perceive me? Instead, I want to focus on devoting my heart to the Lord and letting him form and fashion me into the person he would have for me to be. See, the temptation in our culture, and it's been the temptation as long as people have lived, has been to chase physical beauty or to chase the culture's definition of beauty. And you may hit some markers where you feel like, oh man, I'm measuring up to the world, but it won't last. We know it's completely futile to chase the physical beauty. For my younger friends, my friends who are students, teenage girls, if you can understand right now to place the priority on your heart for the Lord, he will form and fashion true beauty in you. True beauty. What does true beauty look like? He says true beauty is the gentle and quiet spirit. That's what true beauty is. It's the work of the heart. It's what Jesus has done because it's the character of Christ living in you. Now, some of you may say right now, man, I am not quiet and I am not gentle. You know, am I in trouble? No, he's not talking about your personality. I mean, some of you are naturally loud. Some of you are naturally boisterous. That's your personality. Man, be true to who God has wired you to be. What that really means to have a gentle and quiet spirit means to not use your personality to manipulate, to not use your personality to be selfish and get your own way. It means to say, Lord, I want to live under you and I want to give that out. Because you know what true beauty does in a home? True beauty radiates. It radiates. When we're around peaceful, Jesus-loving people, when you realize that it's the Lord that has made you beautiful. It's the Lord that has made you beautiful. It's not the diet that you're on. It's not the workout that you're doing. It's not the clothes or the hair. It's the Lord that makes you beautiful. Man, there are couples that have been married a long time and their vision has faded. And it doesn't matter that they can't see each other physically because they know their true beauty, the heart of their spouse, the heart of their mate. One of the most beautiful people I've ever known in my life is a lady who was never married. Her name was Jane Elder. If you've ever been to our Woodway campus, there's a whole building named after her because her beauty in Jesus Christ so radiated, so radiated. I loved Jane's story. She said this, single her whole life. She said, when I die, I only want female pallbearers. She said, if a man never walked me into church, he's certainly not going to walk me out. Those of us who knew her can tell you she just radiated true beauty because she loved Jesus and she loved giving Jesus away to other people. In your home, the security the Lord gives you can give you peace. And you give that peace away to other people. It's just such a grace gift. And did you notice this? Husbands are commanded to die for their wives, not because their wives have earned it. And wives are commanded to respect their husbands, not because their husbands have earned it, but because it's a grace gift. The Lord has given it to us, and then you give it away to other people. And for some of you, this is so hard because you're married to a person right now who doesn't want to cooperate. You're married to someone who is hurtful and harmful. There's no excuse for abuse ever. Please know that. But in the context even of a difficult relationship, the Lord is at work. He can work. I see him do miracles all the time. You model love. You model respect. You model his true beauty. And then the last couple of verses. He says, for this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands. In other words, not focused on their external, but the internal. Like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. Not Lord, capital L Lord, like Lord God, but just a respectful term. Some of you think Lord and Lady Grantham, that kind of Lord, just an honorable way of addressing her husband. But here's the key. He says, you are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Can I read that again? He said, you are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. There are so many wives. Man, you want to love your husbands and your kids well. You want to have a fresh start. But the problem is you're afraid. And I understand that. Maybe you've had a horrible example growing up. Maybe you haven't seen it done right. But the Lord is doing it right. He will do it right. How do you model? You model by trusting the Lord even in the face of your fear. You step out in faith right now. If I love, fear is I'm going to be taken for granted. If I love, he's always going to get his way. That's fear. I love because God has called me to love, and he will give me the love that I need. And that love will be beautiful in your home. God has given us this gift. It's a gift of marriage, always in growing through the immaturity, always growing through the difficulties. But the longer you walk with God, truly the sweeter the relationship with him grows, and the relationship with those people that we care about. It grows. His way works. I believe that with all my heart. I've seen it over and over again. And each passing year, as I know more couples and I know more people, I'm more convinced of the power and the grace of God and that there is no hope apart from him. So begin to live in it now. And maybe you've been stuck in the ditch. It's time to get out of the ditch and start doing it his way. Maybe it's time to ask for help because God's way works. His way works. Let me just leave you with one last picture. Those of you who are golf fans, sports fans, you may know that the Ryder Cup has been going on this weekend. It's a golf competition. It's the American pros against the European pros. They play about every other year. And anyway, the Europeans have had this incredible winning streak. I think they've won 30 years in a row when the tournament is in Europe. And so the U.S. golfers have wanted to come back. They wanted to come and they wanted to win and they wanted to start their own streak of winning. We've had a great team that came together this time. But if you followed it, when they started on Friday, they just got demolished. In the first, I think, 9 matches, the Americans won 1. They were so far behind that to kickstart Saturday morning, hopefully a comeback, Zach Johnson, our captain, he put a team together of Scotty Scheffler, who's the #1 golfer in the world, and Brooks Koepka, who's won 5 majors. 2 amazing golfers. He's like, okay, guys, it's time for you to stem the tide. Go out and win one for us. But things went terrible for them. If you followed the match, the Europeans won 9 out of the first 11 holes. The Americans were so far behind, they ended it after the 11th hole, and they just walked off in defeat. There's no point in continuing to play because you can't come back from that. So the worst defeat in Ryder Cup history for 2 incredible golfers. Well, after the match was over, they care, they're passionate, they felt the weight of it, and Scotty Scheffler just had a moment where he broke down. He just broke down. It got to him, and he just began to cry. And I want you to see this picture. As he was breaking down in such a great moment of weakness for him, but such vulnerability, there was one voice. There was one person. That's his wife, Meredith. It could have been a coach. It could have been his caddy. It could even have been one of his parents. But no one had the voice that his wife had for him in that moment. And I don't know what words she said to him. He's a Christian, probably prayerfully, man, God's got you. God's going to see you through this. She spoke words of life to him. You have such a powerful voice. But this is such a beautiful picture because this is a crisis moment for him. It was a crisis moment for them. But you know, he's not going to play golf his whole life. He's not going to compete at this level. But there may be a day when he's 40, 50, 60, 70, I don't know. But he's also going to be in great vulnerability. He's also going to be in great need. And the power of his wife's voice to say, God's got us. God's got you. God's got our family. What a picture. What a beautiful picture. Ladies, thank you for the way you love your families, the way you love your kids, your friendships. But let us, as men and women, as husbands and wives, let us do it God's way because his way works.